everybody. Hello, hello. Thank you so much for being here today. We are so happy to have you. Our fearless leader, Joe Rossi, is taking a much-needed spring break day with her lovely son. So today, you have me doing my best Joe Rossi impersonation. So I'm going to get it going. Hello to Steve Winnick. Hello to Hubby Jenkins playing some beautiful guitar in the background that we absolutely love. That I accidentally muted. Thank you so much to Katie Abadou for running the tech for us today. Hello to Peggy and Kelly, and hello to Aloysius and Kevin and Jim in New York City. Hello to Joni and Brian and Deborah and Jamie and Susan G. Hello Valerie. Hello Al. Hello Trish. Hello to Karen and Annette and Arlene. Hello to Jim Harkless, it's so good to see you here today. Hello to Christiana and Sheila. Hello Sue, hello Fred. Hello to Jenny and Fran and Dale and Anna, hello. Hello to Isabel and Doug and Luda and Victoria and Janet and Bonnie Schuster and Carolyn, hello. And hello to Lisa, Susan Miller, Jamie, hello. Jacqueline, hi. Hello to Anne, and hello to all of our friends off video. Hello to Gwen and Tom and Victoria, who just popped on video. Hello to Tom, and hello to Cricket, and hello to Lisa, and hello to Betsy. Hello, Betsy from Washington Rebels. Hi, hello to Rosalie, and Elizabeth and Martha and Dick, and all of our other friends who are still joining us. And a big hello to everybody out there on Facebook Live. Muting was not part of the impersonation, Karen, but we can pretend that it was, but don't tell Joey said that. Today we are so lucky to be joined by Hubby Jenkins and Steve Winnick, who is hosting for us on day 6 of our Archive Challenge week. It is so fantastic. And right now we have some links going into the chat. As always, we have our Daily Antidote Facebook group that you can join. Catch up with old videos there. There's a donate link in the chat. It's not my email, but Joe's email is in the chat. If you would like to sign up for our daily email list, please do so. And now I'm going to turn it over to Steve Winnick to introduce our obviously incredibly talented guest. Thank you. Go ahead, Steve. Take it away. Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Hubby. That was fantastic.
Thanks so much,
Take
Hubby.
it away, Steve.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. As Aaron said, I'm Steve Winnick, and I'm a Folklife specialist at the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. We're now on our 6th day of our Archive Challenge Partnership Week on the Daily Antidote of Song. So we want to thank Washington Rebels and Carpe Diem Arts and Aaron and Katie, Joe Rossi and Busy Graham, and all the folks who make this happen. Jennifer and I, you saw Jennifer yesterday, and she usually hosts this with me. We just love working in the largest folklore archive in the US, and certainly one of the largest in the world. And our archive dates all the way back to 1928. It's now called the American Folklife Center Archive at the Library of Congress. And it contains field recordings of famous performers like Muddy Waters and Pete Seeger, Leadbelly, Woody Guthrie, Aunt Molly Jackson, and Gene Ritchie, folks like that. But of course, it also contains a lot of field recordings of people that we don't know who they are. The field workers, for whatever reason, didn't necessarily always write down the name of the performers, and sometimes they did, but that information got separated from the recordings over the years. Our recordings come from a wide variety of sources, and sometimes we didn't get all the information. And that's the case with the material that Hubby's going to play today. We don't know exactly who the performers were in the archive on this recording, but a lot of these folks were extraordinary performers, and a lot of this material sort of forms the unwritten history of our country, and this is an example of that kind of thing. Now, one thing that's been going on since the archive was founded back in the 1920s is that artists of all kinds have been using the materials in the archive to create their own art, either doing their own versions of materials in the archive or using them as a jumping off point for compositions and other creativity. So one of Aaron Copland's most famous pieces of symphonic music, originally for the ballet Rodeo, but then later as a symphonic piece, as 4 dance numbers from Rodeo, I think it was called, is a fiddle tune from our archive called Bonaparte's Retreat. And another example is that the first track of Johnny Cash's first LP is a song that's first recorded in our archive. So in 2015, we had this idea of making that a little bit more intentional on our own part, to invite artists to research our collections, to find a song or tune that really inspires them, and then to run with that. And we called it the Archive Challenge. And that showcase in 2015 was so successful that we've done it every year since in some form. So we've done it at the Folk Alliance International Conference, we've done it on stage at the Library of Congress, and now during the pandemic, we're doing it from home. And we'll tell you more about the Stay-at-Home Archive Challenge or the At-Home Archive Challenge a little bit later. But earlier in the week, you may remember we hosted Dom Flemons, a founder of the Carolina Chocolate Drops, and today we have the honor of hosting one of Dom's former bandmates from that group, Hubby Jenkins. In fact, I think I first met Hubby when the Carolina Chocolate Drops played on stage at the Library of Congress and the Coolidge Auditorium, and I was privileged to do a brief kind of on-stage interview with them. And of course, Hubby has visited the archive a couple of times himself, and I've met him then as well. He is Brooklyn born and raised, where my parents both also come from. He's got roots, of course, in the South, and he's a great singer and multi-instrumentalist who has been nominated for both Grammy Awards and Americana Awards. And in addition to the Carolina Chocolate Drops, he's been a member of the Rhiannon Giddens Band, and he's traveled all over the world with those groups. But like most musicians lately, he's been going it mostly solo with online and virtual performances and recordings. So we will let Hubby share with you which song from our archive he's chosen to teach to us today. And we hope that you'll stay with us for a few minutes after that. We'll have a short discussion about the song and the influences, the collection context and all that, and why he chose it. So let me say no more for now, except to welcome our very special guest, the talented Hubby Jenkins. Thanks for being here, Hubby.
I just wanted to do it. Okay, hi. Thanks for having me. Good morning, noon, afternoon to everybody. And yeah, the song I chose is called Rock My Soul in the Bosom of Abraham. And I guess we'll talk about the style and talk about more why I chose it. But the style is kind of in that Jubilee singing gospel quartet style. But I decided to move it to a open E tuning slide guitar style. I guess we'll talk about it more later. But it's basically just that kind of call and response. I'm sure a lot of people know it. Won't you rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham? You rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham. You get it. Let's do it. Won't you rock my soul in you rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham. You rock my soul in oh Lord, you rock my soul. Why don't you rock my soul? Yeah, now rock my bosom of Abraham. You rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham. You rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham. Oh Lord, you rock my soul. Why don't you rock? Well, the rich man lived, and he lived so well. Why don't you praise the Lord? When he died, got a home in hell. He said, see yonder sun, see how steady she run. Don't you never let it catch you with your work undone. Well now, oh man, Lazarus just lived around till then. When he died, had his home in hell. Well, Lord, you rock my soul. Why don't you rock my soul? Won't you rock my soul in you rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham. You rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham. Oh Lord, rock my soul. Why don't you rock my soul? Well, poor man Lazarus, just as poor as I. Children, when he died, had a home on high. Praise praise the Lord. He said, see yonder sun, see how I said she run. Don't you never let it catch you with your work undone. Well, now, poor man Lazarus just as poor as our children. When he died, had his home on high. Well, Lord, you rock my soul. Why don't you rock my soul? Won't you rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham? You rock my soul in the... You rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham. Oh, Lord, you rock my soul. Why don't you rock my soul one more time? Won't you? Bosom of Abraham, you bosom of... You rock my soul in the... Oh, Lord, you rock my soul. Thank you.
Wow. Awesome, awesome, hubby. So,
Thank you.
wow, what a great version of that song. And it's, you know, it's so different from the field recording too, which is a vocal quartet. We'll hear a little bit of that later, but how did you decide? So I know, I mean, one of the things about hubby that's great, of course, is that he plays lots of different instruments in lots of different styles. He plays old time music on the banjo and mandolin and all kinds of stuff, and also slide guitar, obviously. And so the question that sort of occurs to me first is, how do you decide on this as the way to arrange it? Why go with the slide guitar? It was a great sound, but what about the song suggested that to you?
Well, this song is actually a song that I've been performing for a little while. I'm like all about spirituals and gospel music and have been just going through it. And so I've been playing this song in standard tuning, usually in the key of E or F, and focusing a lot on the syncopation part, like the part about the gospel, about the Jubilee quartets and the gospel quartets is like that boom, 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 boom,
Right.
like that whole feeling, and just getting that through percussive strumming of the guitar. And so when I knew I wanted to do something from the John Work collection, because Black people, and then I wanted to, once that song came through, I was like, oh, there's a field recording of a group covering this song almost exactly as the Golden Gate Quartet, which is that wonderful thing of like the commercial recordings coming from the folk tradition, then going back and forth. So I thought that'd be interesting. And then I thought, if I'm kind of doing this new version, it'd be interesting to approach it in a different way. So with the slide, it's more about filling in the other voices. So when I'm playing it solo without 100 million people singing backup and waving hands, it's just the slide that's doing all the responsive parts. Why don't you praise King Jesus? Now the guitar is singing that. And it just appealed to me to try it that way. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, you mentioned John Work. So what attracted you to his collection in particular? I mean, you did say Black people, but expand on that a little bit, if you would.
I will say that, I grew up in Brooklyn, a poor Black child in Bed-Stuy, Steve Martin, and I, also facts, but, when I first started playing the banjo, I didn't know that, festivals even existed. I didn't know the Library of Congress existed. I didn't know that Black people played the banjo. All I knew was Hee Haw and Beverly Hillbillies. And so there was a lot of things. Anytime I talk to a Black banjo player, they talk about that period of time where you thought you were the only one, and then you're totally shocked. And I went to the second Black banjo gathering in Boone, North Carolina, back in 2008 or 9. And a friend of mine, Steve, was driving me, and I fell asleep in the car and woke up, and he was playing this album called Altamont. And it was the first time that I had ever heard a Black string band in my life, and that was Nathan Frazier and Frank Patterson. And it blew my mind, recorded by some guy named John Work III, who I had never heard of either. And I just assumed, at that point, I just assumed that the Lomaxes recorded everything before 1940 in America ever. That was it. So it was interesting to learn about, John Work III out of Fisk University, just being like, right? Fisk University? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Just like going at it and doing this work and being able to go, make sense, go to places where Lomax couldn't go, get music that is not necessarily just religious music, and showing the different facets of Black culture through this music. It just blew my mind. And of course, then that led me to like Zora Neale Hurston and like learning that she even did that stuff. And it just opened up a lot of doors for me to access, old time American music also being my music, and in some ways we could talk about it like really my music, but like that's a totally different conversation. But John
Right.
Work III, like just on a personal level, was hearing those recordings like opened up a whole world to me of like empowerment through old time music, and knowing that like I'm not borrowing, like this is also mine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. We
Yeah.
actually brought along a picture of John Work the third that we can show folks. And yeah, so he was just this really important figure in traditional American music. His grandfather was a choir director in Nashville, and some of his choristers were actually in the original Fisk Jubilee Singers. Some of his grandfather's choristers, I should say, were in the original Fisk Jubilee Singers. His father was a professor at Fisk University, and some of those choristers were his students. Those original Fisk Jubilee Singers were the students of John Wesley Work III's father, and he too became a professor at Fisk University. After, I mean, you mentioned your connection to New York as well. After attending Juilliard, which wasn't called Juilliard at the time, but it was the Columbia University Music School. That's where John Work went for his music training after getting his bachelor's degree at Fisk. So he was a really important figure, and he was a professor at Fisk University and did collecting, often with the help of the Library of Congress, either just by borrowing our equipment or by collecting with Alan Lomax, which he did on a large collecting trip. But some of the greatest stuff that he collected, as you said, Hubby, he was just able to get because he was there on the ground. He was there where African Americans gathered when they weren't in the places that Lomax knew to go to, right? So Alan Lomax would go to churches, as you said, or he would go often also to prisons to collect from people, but he wasn't necessarily there on the street corner all the time, the way John Work was just walking home from school, right? He would pass buskers on the street and he would record them, and that's those Fraser and Patterson recordings are great examples of that. But this particular recording actually comes from an interesting context as well, which is the Fort Valley State College music festivals, folk music festivals in Georgia. So those festivals ran from 1940 to 1955, and for 2 years they were extensively recorded, and we have those recordings online at the Library of Congress website, so we can put that link into the chat as well, the link to that collection. But that's where this comes from. And Hubby, you mentioned that that these singers, whom we don't know who they are, it wasn't written down who the ensemble was, were singing this very, very similarly to the Golden Gate Quartet. Mention their influence, the Gates, as they were sometimes called, and
Sure.
how they just lie behind a lot of this quartet music that we hear.
Yeah, well, the Gospel Gate Quartet, they were started in or around, I think, Norfolk, Virginia, in, we could say, like the early mid 30s.
Yeah.
And their big break was, they moved to North Carolina at some point, were on a radio station there, so they probably might have gotten heard in Georgia, near where this was recorded by that point. But their big break was the Spirituals to Swing concert that John Hammond put on in 1938. That was kind of like their big thing, and then they started recording for Bluebird and then later OK Records. And so they had gotten pretty popular by then. And then like in the 40s, they did something in Washington that really helped them blow up. But by this point, they had already recorded their version of Rock My Soul in the Bosom of Abraham. And it's just interesting to think about like, the Fisk Jubilee Singers. It's just another reason why it was fun to pick this recording, like kind of spreading the spirituals and like the black way of singing this church stuff, and how much they had a hard time when they first started, and then creating this thing, and then how that evolved. The gospel Golden Gate, they were borrowing from that as much as they were from like the Mills Brothers and combining it together to create this thing. And I've heard them talk about, or like Orlandis, who joined in 35, like talking about how they couldn't play in churches because their sound was jazz to them.
Right.
You know, their sound was too modern or too hip. So they had a hard time at first. So I think it's just interesting that, like, you know, they recorded this 2 or 3 years before this field recording, and this group is like bringing it at a festival, like it's already in the ether in that short amount of time, and it's very amazing to me. And so, yeah, their importance is shown there, just how much they're able to break that barrier, to bring the popular into the church and to spread it to like wide audiences. Eventually they end up moving to Paris and just like living there and just playing this music all throughout Europe and like spreading that sound there. So very important, and their legacy is extremely deep.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You mentioned that they spent that time on the radio in North Carolina, and that was really influential. And in fact, we've found versions of things in our archive that almost certainly were based on their arrangements, but there was no commercial recording that preceded the field recording. But there are radio transcriptions of them doing those songs. So they did it on the radio, and people, stood around and listened to it and figured out some of the parts and sang it back. Even before the Golden Gate Quartet would make a commercial recording, sometimes people had heard them on the radio and were singing their versions. So it is pretty amazing. And that thing in Washington that they did that you mentioned, by the way, was a concert at the Library of Congress with Josh White, which is recorded. We have recordings of it. We're not allowed to place it online just because of the rights issues. Josh White and the Golden Gate Quartet are all people who made their living out of music, and we can't just freely offer their music to people. But you can often find that's been released on commercial recordings, and you can find them on. I don't think it's in print currently, but it was on a CD, and you can often find those on whatever site you use to buy used CDs. So you can look for that, the Josh White and the Golden Gate Quartet concert from the Library of Congress.
They do a really rockin' version of the Gospel Train, which is probably my favorite Golden Gate song. They do a really good.
They do that at that concert.
Yeah, with Josh White on guitar. I think I'm telling. Yeah. I'm guessing, but I feel like I've heard it before, like on NPR or something like that. Yeah,
it's a great concert, and it had commentary by several people, sort of introducing some of the songs, and it was sort of a kind of a quasi-academic presentation, but also with Josh White and the quartet. It was great stuff. So yeah, so look for that if you can find it. But a little more about you, Hubby. Why don't you tell us what you're doing these days, how you're remaining connected to folks during this? Oh,
I'm doing a lot of traveling. I was at a hugging, kissing festival the other day, which was really nice down in Florida. I'm about to go on tour in Texas next week. And no, what have I been doing? I've been doing a lot of the same as everyone else, like keeping sanity. I tried to bake, but my starter never started, so I didn't join that trend. That didn't happen for me. I picked up the violin, and one of my neighbors moved out. I don't think it's related, but that's in the mix. And right now, I've been kind of deep into this gospel thing and just kind of actually collecting that together and trying to someday make a record of, like, you listen to Reverend Hubby Jenkins. It's 3 a.m. on Hubby Gospel Radio, and then just sing gospel songs and like have my mom call into the show. That's like my dream thing right now. So working on that, and telling people who I can't see but I love that I love them as much as possible, and staying healthy and eating more vegetables. The doctor told me to cut it out with the late night milk and cookies. So there's that, and
Sounds good. You do have a fairly recent EP out, is that right?
Within reason, I guess I put it out last year, some point. It felt like 10 years ago, but maybe like last year. But just an EP of like some gospel songs that I really liked, and hopefully, you can find it at my website or at Bandcamp. It might be on Spotify, I don't remember, and more to come.
But you can definitely find it at Hubby's website, and we'll put the link for that in the chat as well. You can get to all your latest Hubby Jenkins information on there. So I also mentioned that the at-home archive challenge is something that anyone can participate in, and it basically consists of looking online for materials from the American Folklife Center archive that you would like to adapt, and then coming up with your own version of it. And what we ask people to do is to get on camera or just on audio if you prefer. Make a recording of yourself, post it on social media, and put on our tag so we can find it. And we've been having fun with this, and there's a blog post that I wrote that kind of details the most useful part of it is that it tells you where all these collections are, because some of our collections are on the Library of Congress website, but others live in other websites around the web. So there's an extensive list of where you can find our collections, and then, you know, sort of minimal instructions for how to do it. We don't want to restrict you too much, but whatever you want to do with our material, we are happy that you're doing it. So if we've got that link up in the chat as well, and folks can look for that. So Hubby, we want to thank you one more time, and we definitely want to have you, well, actually, you know, I haven't seen if there are a lot of questions in the chat, but let's see what we've got in here.
Okay.
Yeah. Mostly interesting comments. People asked about the photo of John Work and what the date is. I'm not sure of the date of the photo itself, but it was published in the program of the Fort Valley State College Folk Festival in 1941. So he considered it a current photo of himself in 1941, but it's before that, and probably not too much before that. So mostly I see some cool comments here, including someone mentioning remembering seeing the Golden Gate Quartet on TV in Germany, which was their first experience of Black American gospel singing. Someone noticing the photo of Henry O. Tanner's banjo lesson hanging on your bookcase there. So that's cool. Oh, yeah. So yeah, so if people do have questions, oh, here we go. Was the Golden Gate Quartet the source of all the Alabama gospel quartet singing that Elvis wanted to do? That's an interesting question. Probably not all of it, but yes, the Golden Gate Quartet would have been very influential on most quartet gospel singing. When we say quartet has, you know, became a very sort of loose term, because you had people who called themselves quartets, but there were 5 or 6 people in them. And really it referred to 4-part harmony for the most part. So there were 4 parts. But even among that, you know, not everyone was singing exactly the same notes all the time. So we do have examples of quartets with 5 or 6 people. So quartet was more a description of the style of gospel singing in those small harmony groups than it was a sort of very strict indication that there were 4 people. So
and they became super popular.
Friend,
there were just tons of them at some point. So like it was just like pop music. So probably just inspired by the sound as much as anything.
Yeah. Well, you know, and people, I mean, it's sort of the same, similar to the sort of barbershop quartet thing, that people could just do it anywhere. They didn't need sort of a special location, or they didn't need instruments. So it was something that could come together pretty readily. So our good friend Betsy Fulford asks whether you could give us a little demo of slide guitar playing.
Sure.
And explain how the slide works, because it's kind of cool, and not everyone will be familiar with it.
Sure. So let's see. The first part is your slide. So this is a little brass cylinder here that you can see. Relatively, whatever. There's different weights. You can get it made out of glass. You can get it made out of other things, but don't get it made out of ceramic. It's just silly. My guitar is tuned to an open tuning, which means that it's tuned to a chord. So I don't have to press anything in order to make a chord. Right now it's tuned to open D, but with my capo at the 2nd fret, that makes it an E. Not an uncommon tuning. Your other very common tuning in blues music would be open G or open A, capo at the 2nd fret. Although Son House tended to be in B flat a lot, but that's not what the question is. So what's happening next? Basically, I'm playing with my slide on my pinky. Others would play it on their ring finger. Fred McDowell played like that. He also used a smaller slide playing in that style. One way means that if I have it on my ring finger, I'm probably going to do less chords, as opposed to on my pinky, I can play some chords. And so I'm putting the slide on the guitar. And this is the tricky part, is figuring out what your pressure is. You hear that buzzing, that means I'm not pushing down enough. You hear that sound of the fretboard, I'm pushing down too hard. So it's finding that sweet spot. What the slide does is that it moves across the strings. It allows you to meld your notes together. It allows you to play notes inside of the note. So this is going to be just inside the 3rd fret. So I'm really just hitting an F, but I can, with the slide, get those little tiny notes. So I can just say, oh yeah, 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 oh. Your vibrato. It's just a wiggle of my wrist. My thumb is planted in the middle of the neck, but that's fine. Is that a good demo? Yeah, that's the slide. So, I could go on and on, but that's it in a nutshell.
So just to explain sort of the physics of it, what the slide does is it stops the string from vibrating at exactly that spot, but allows it to vibrate everywhere else. If you touch it with your bare finger, because your finger is soft, it actually stops the string from vibrating at all unless you touch it in very specific places, right? So, but the slide allows it to stop just there and vibrate everywhere else, which means that it acts more or less like a fret. That's why we put frets on a guitar, because they stop the string in that way as well. They're hard. So what the slide does is it essentially allows you to have a fret anywhere on the string, and that's why you don't just have the half steps that you have with the frets. You can get any microtone within the length of that string. And so when Hubby's sliding the slide up and down, the note is sliding with him, as if he had infinite frets along that board. So that's how that works, and it's a great technique. And you can use, as Hubby said, ceramic. You can use glass, metal, and some people didn't put something on their finger. They would hold like a knife or something. So you can also do it with an object, a metal bar. Someone pointed out in the chat that we neglected to actually play the field recording, which we do have. So let's do that. Let's hear. This is what the quartet sounded like who sang this. And this is a little bit, to call it a field recording is a little bit of a stretch, because it was actually at a folk music festival. So this was in a venue with an audience. It's basically a concert recording, but it's of an unknown quartet. We don't know who the people were. So this is the Fort Valley State College recording of Rock My Soul in the Bosom of Abraham. So, that is that great quartet style that was pioneered by the Golden Gate Quartet with that, with that syncopation that Hubby was talking about. And you can see how brilliantly Hubby took that idea and adapted it to slide guitar and one voice. Just such a great job, Hubby, and we're in awe of your talent and just the way that you thought about this and the great music that you make.
Oh, thank you.
One more time, we just want to thank Hubby Jenkins. I would like to thank Washington Rebels, Carpe Diem Arts, Aaron, Katie, Joe Rossi, Busy Graham, all the folks who've helped make this happen. And of course, Hubby Jenkins And Hubby, would you be willing to play a little bit of the song more for us?
No, not at all. Absolutely not.
Oh,
You know
well.
what? You talked me into it.
Cool.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for all the kind words and thanks for asking me to participate. And I can't wait till I can come visit you and mess up the tape as I'm trying to put it through the machine. And,
That's right.
Yeah. So let's do it. Oh, I got it messed up. Well, poor man Lazarus, just as poor as I. Children when he died, had a home on high. She said, see yonder sun, see how said she run, don't you never let you catch you with your work undone. Poor man Lazarus, just as poor as I. Said now when he died, had a home on high. Well, Lord, you rock my soul, why don't you rock my soul? Won't you rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham? You rock my soul in the, you rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham. Oh Lord, you rock my soul.
Thank you so much, Hubby. That was amazing. And we are so lucky that we got to have you here to sing with us and chat with us. And we hope that we can have you back again because you were just an absolute joy.
Anytime, you let me know.
So much for coming. And thank you, of course, to Steve and his right-hand man right there. Let's see him, Steve.
Here he is, Figgy the archive cat.
There's Fig. Our favorite archive cat. And thank you again so much to Katie for running the tech. And we are going to go ahead and say goodbye to all of our friends out there on Facebook Live. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. And we hope that you will join us again tomorrow for day 7, which I believe is the last day of our archive challenge week. So
That's
please
right.
stay tuned and come in tomorrow for even more.
Yeah.